Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Beyond the Box Score. I'm Trayvon Hastings. With me is my partner in crime, Joey Korzanowski, as always. And fun fact, I'm going to be recording from my computer for this one, so we'll see how this goes. Hopefully, there's no technical difficulties. Otherwise, we'll have to do this again. But we're gonna just jump right in because it has been a crazy 48 hours in the sports world in a multitude of ways. The WBC with Team USA losing to Italy, the drama there. We also have all the stuff in NBA that happened yesterday, which we're gonna start with, and then also NFL free agency and all of the news that has gone on in the first couple of days. But with all that in mind, Bam Adebayo, 83-point performance against the Washington Wizards yesterday. Miami putting up 150 total to decimate the Wizards. Overall, I didn't get a chance to watch this. I've been able to see snippets after the fact, but definitely being somebody who was able to kind of monitor and check the box score as time went on without the ability to watch that game because we're in Ohio, I definitely found it to be very fascinating in what Miami was trying to do to get Bam to that 83 or that 81 or whatever the number was. Essentially, they were chasing the stat pad here, and I definitely have scrolled around on Twitter, seen a lot of the turmoil, a lot of the conflicting views on Bam's performance, and if it's truly ethical, if it should truly be recognized, because a lot of it was he took 43 jump shots or shots in the game, and he took 43 free throws. So there's definitely a mixed bag there. Bam opened the game, 31 points in the first quarter, 10 of 16 from the field, 5 of 8 from three, 6 of 7 from the line. So very efficient first quarter. The problem was after that first quarter, Bam shot just 2 of 16 from three. There was a lot of shot checking going on. The Heat fouling late, up 27 to get him to the 81 plus point total held by Kobe Bryant. So, what are your thoughts on not only the performance, but also what the Heat chose to do in getting Bam to that record, and then also the discourse after the fact?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by the discourse after the fact, but I feel like the discourse just kind of sums up like where the NBA is kind of at right now. Like fans don't really like the NBA; they just like to complain. If things aren't done a certain way, and fans are very nostalgic. And I'm sure we're going to be this way, 20 years down the line. So everybody's comparing it to Kobe's 81-point game. But look, the fact of the matter is, I mean, we just had a center score 83 points in an NBA game. It doesn't really matter how many free throws he took. He had 45 points at halftime. I mean, and you mentioned you went 2 for 16 from three, in the second half. I mean, imagine if he hit a couple of those, he probably would have hit 100. It wasn't the most efficient, obviously, but at the end of the day, 83 points is 83 points. I mean, the entire second half, especially in the fourth quarter, the Wizards were triple teaming him. I mean, they were doing anything they could to get the ball out of his hands, and they were legitimately fouling him. It's not like he was foul baiting. It's not like he was getting handed any calls. They were genuinely fouling him. So I think it would be different if it was a foul bait situation, or if it was a situation where he was kind of felt like he got handed uh these points. Now I know in a regular blowout he might not have played a lot of that fourth quarter, but look, you're obviously going for the record, so I definitely don't blame him there. But I just think the discourse has gotten a little bit out of hand because at first when I first looked at the box score, I was like, only made 20 shots, 83 points, But then you go back and you watch it, and it's all right, these were legitimately earned fouls, and he had 30 in the first quarter, 45 in the first half. I mean, he was cooking. He did what he had to do when the game was still in reach. While the game was still competitive. Did the fourth quarter get out of hand? Yes, a little bit. When you look at Kobe's 81-point game, nobody on the Lakers took a shot for the final 7 minutes of that game. And I believe Kobe shot 20 some free throws. When Devin Booker went for 71, he shot 20 some free throws. Like, yeah, it happens. I mean, you need free throws to kind of get to that point in the score. I mean, nobody's putting up 83 points on strictly jump shots or strictly threes. It's just not happening. So I think the discourse got way out of hand. People saying it was unethical and this and that. I disagree. I mean, is there really an ethical way to score 83 points? I don't think so. So look, Bam scored 83 points. Probably something that we're not going to see happen for who knows how long, because with the way this is a whole different conversation, but with the way the NBA is, I feel like more people can score 80 plus points than than we realize. But this is probably something that's not going to be done for quite some time. So, yeah, I thought the discourse was way out of hand.
So I'm glad you brought up some of the other performances that we have had. Bam setting the NBA record in free throws attempted in a game at 43. The number is astronomical. I mean, the next closest is Dwight Howard at 39, and then he's followed by a couple other centers who are active, but people don't probably know that all the time. Andre Drummond is in there, DeAndre Jordan is in there, and then Giannis he rounds out that top five in free throws attempted in a game. So Shaq, surprisingly, not even on that list, which was interesting to me. But looking at all of these performances, so Kobe took 18. He made 18 of his 20 free throws. He was definitely more efficient from three, 7 of 13. Bam was 7 of 22. Kobe made 28 of his 46 shots, so he was just a lot more efficient from the field, shooting 61%. There's games like Luka's, for example, which is in my opinion the greatest single game ever played in the history of the league, not factoring in Wilt's 100 because there's questions about Wilt's 100, but also back when they played. First off, in Wilt's 100-point game, they were doing the same thing. They were fouling late. They were giving up easy baskets so they could get Wilt to 100. This is like a thing that has been stated. Obviously, in terms of fact checking, that's a little bit hard to do because there's apparently no footage of this game. But Wilt also, when he played early on in his career, they had double the possessions that they have now in the NBA. The pace was so astronomical. The next tallest player in the league, the Wilt, for part of his career is under 6'9", 6'8", and he's a 7'1" plus center. So Wilt had a lot of advantages for sure. But that aside, Kobe had his performance. I believe he took 13 of the last 17 shots in that game against Toronto. I believe I saw that on Twitter. Looking at some of these other games, Luka, he had the 70 ball, right? 73, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. He shot 25 of 33. So 76% from the field, 8 of 13 from 3, which is 62% from 3. And then he also shot 15 of 16 from the free throw line. So purely from just efficiency, that's probably the best game anybody is ever going to have in the game of basketball. And if the Mavericks chose to do what the Heat did, Luka probably has like 105 points in that game. I'm not even like trying to beat around it. Like, it's probably what it is. Luka took significantly less shot attempts in comparison to Bam or Kobe and some of these other guys. David Thompson in 1978, he dropped 73 points as well. No three-point line back then, so 28 of 38, but then 17 of 20 from the free throw line. I mean, the list goes on and on with these. Damian Lillard, he's kind of a exception to this to an extent. He made 13 threes. He attempted 22. He made 22 shots total for the game, but then he also made all 14 of his free throws. Donovan Mitchell, when he had his 70-point game, he took 25 free throws. The list goes on and on and on. David Robinson took 25. Embiid took 23. Devin Booker took 26. The point is, for these astronomical scoring results to happen, players have to get to the free throw line. They have to be efficient from the field, and they have to be efficient from the three-point line. All those performances that I have said, Bam's was the least efficient. Almost all of these players shot basically 56% up to 68% outside of Luka's. The efficiency is absurd. It was simply one of those games where guys got hot, guys could not miss, and they kept getting fed the ball. That has been the track record of these types of games, but also they had to get to the free throw line. That it's a free 15 to 20 points if you want to have that type of performance. So, with that being said, everybody gets on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with the fouls and stuff. There may be a time when Shai can, get 25 free throws and maybe hit 5, 6, 7 threes and be efficient in mid-range like he always has been, and maybe he's sitting at 60 or 70 or 80. It's possible, but there's not very many players that are gonna just... I think there's a lot of players that could do it. I agree on that front, but I do think it's just not that attainable for winning basketball, and I don't think it's conducive to what would be a single game performance. It's not something that I think is going to happen, if ever again, just very rarely, at the best, for sure. So, I mean, Bam's performance, I'm not going to sit here. I'm kind of in the middle about it because the Heat were very very blatantly doing some things that are questionable for sure. But in most of all of these games, except Kobe's, they were either blowouts or teams were or players were chasing at the end statistically. So I'm not gonna sit here and gripe about it. It is what it is. The Wizards maybe shouldn't have fouled him enough times to put him on the line 43 times as well. That's another factor, but uh, it was definitely like an unforeseen circumstance, something that I don't think any of us expected for sure. So, with that being said, that was the highlight of the NBA night. I mean, Montas Buzelis had 41 points, Wemby had 39, Josh Giddey had a 21 point, 13 rebounds, 17 assists, triple double. Evan Carter scored 24 second half points for the Kings as they came back and beat the Pacers. There was a lot of remarkable performances in the league yesterday that are getting overshadowed by the fact that Bam did this thing. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be, overshadowed or overlooked because 83 points is 83 points. But like Cam Payne had 32 points and 10 assists last night. A lot of people probably don't even know he's still in the league, but he had 32 and 10, shooting 9 of 10, 8 of 8 from 3, and 6 of 6 from the free throw line. So I just think it's worth noting some of the other performances that took place yesterday, last night, because everybody's focused on Bam, but it was a heck of a day scoring wise in the NBA. There was a lot of high scoring performances for sure.
Yeah, it's honestly kind of funny just when you look at like the coverage around the league. When a game like this happens, of course it should definitely be covered and it should definitely be analyzed and broken down all the things. But when it generates this kind of conversation, you don't even realize that Buzelis scores 41 for the Bulls. A younger player like that who's definitely got some upside. If Bam doesn't score 83 points, that's much more of a talking point. You know, Even I saw somebody say that they would rather have Victor Wembanyama's 39 points, ethical 39 points last night than Bam's unethical 83. I'm like, yeah, okay, we're just saying anything to generate clicks now, these days. But we're real quick to kind of go back to your point on efficiency. When Donovan Mitchell went for 71 a couple of years ago, only 20 free throws. He made 20 free throws, 20 of 25, but he shot 64% from the line. So I think if you are going to nitpick Bam's performance, like I think the efficiency aspect of it makes sense. But clearly, at the end of the day, the goal is to get the win, and that was what they did. So the efficiency at that point didn't matter because remember when Karl Anthony Towns went. I forget how much he ended up scoring. It was 60 something in that game when he was still on the Timberwolves. I believe it was against the Hornets. I don't mean to
I
get
believe
off
it
track
was
here, but
six. It was somewhere in the 60s. I'd
yeah,
have to
but
look
the,
at
the
that real
second
quick,
half he
but
just started chucking threes. I mean, he realized he was close because it was a late regular season game. Not necessarily saying that the game doesn't matter, but it's later on in the regular season, you can kind of afford to maybe let the game slip a little bit in order to try and go chase a very rare record like that. And I believe the Hornets came back and made it a game. I believe it ended up being a competitive game. I could be wrong, but I don't mean to bog it down there. But yeah, the NBA coverage of last night, it really is interesting because you had sent me a bunch of real screenshots of a bunch of players that went off last night. And it just feels like none of that really kind of gets covered because, you know, we're so just steadfast on trying to, tear down a performance like this from Bams. But I think this kind of just goes to show how bad NBA coverage has been this season. Like a lot of people want to criticize the NBA products and stuff, but when it gets covered like this, I mean, there's just so much debate, and everybody wants to, tear down anything they can. They want to poke holes in anything. I think we should just appreciate an 83-point performance for what it is. It's the second highest scoring performance in any game in NBA history. And we actually have footage of it. Like I think that's just crazy because think about how many performances like where guys have scored a ton, whether it be 50, 60, even 70. Nobody's gotten above 81, where Kobe had said like 83 points, no matter how you put it, is still impressive. You texted one of our group chats that Bam had 30 in the first quarter, and I was like, he probably gonna slow down. Oh, he had 45 at half. We'll see. It's a blowout. And then the Wizards ended up trying to get the ball out of his hands, and they just couldn't. So I do think at the end of the day, I think we need to do better. It was just with NBA coverage in general. I know it might just be a random Tuesday in March, But 83 points, it's a historic performance, and Bam should be. Now, honestly, from the center position, I think is even more impressive because Bam isn't necessarily known for his 3-point shooting. So yeah, he's a bruiser. He gets down low. He gets a lot of looks at the rim. Yeah, he's going to get his free throws. So I'm not too worried about the amount of free throws. I'm not really concerned with how he got it. Yeah, you could poke holes in it, but I think NBA coverage in general, I think we just need to appreciate it more.
And adding to your Karl Anthony Towns point, he had 62 points against the Hornets, the 8 rebounds. Some of the other stats in those I'm not going to focus on because it's not the point of the conversation. Towns shot 21 of 35, 60% from the field, 10 of 15 from three, 67%, and then he also shot 10 of 14 from the free throw line for 71%. So, literally looking at all of these, and I'm scrolling on the, for those who may not know who StatMuse is, they have a pretty relevant Twitter account. They also have an app. You can download StatMuse. It's amazing. You can search almost anything on here. Like, think basketball reference or football reference or any of that, but it's on this app and you can find things a lot quicker. So I pulled up NBA single game scoring record. I've got the top like 50 scoring performances ever on here right now on my phone. So it's really, really beneficial. A lot of these true shooting percentages, almost all of them actually, are above 60 or 70% from the field. And true shooting is the true indicator of what that efficiency was throughout the game. It factors in your 2-point percentage, it factors in your 3-point percentage, and also your free throws. And for almost all of these, phenomenal. I mean, phenomenal performances. And in the top 25 scoring performances of all time, Wilt Chamberlain has 12 of those. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I know there's some disclaimers with Wilt. I am one of those people that definitely is on the disclaimer side, but it's still remarkable to scroll through here and see this guy, Wilt Chamberlain, in here this many times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He's got 5 in the top 10. So, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation for another day when we do like a all-time rankings type of thing. But yeah, Towns definitely was someone indicative of that. A lot of the games after Bam's performance, players and the pressers were getting asked, like, did you see what happened? And Kelly Oubre got asked about it in the Sixers game. He also had 30 last night, double for him, and he said, he was giving credit to Bam. He wasn't trying to discredit him, but then at the end he gave the disclaimer of Joel Embiid did it in 3 quarters and he had 70. So just a thought, and he's not wrong. I think that's one thing to definitely take note of is that there's been performances over time that definitely could have portrayed what Bam did. I mean, Luka had his performance. He didn't take nearly as many shots. James Harden had a 60-point triple-double in 3 quarters, and he did not come back into the game. The aspect with Embiid as well, that was definitely the one that I thought maybe because of how great he was playing. Luka, the same thing. So to kind of end that conversation, I agree on the NBA media coverage thing, not just for this season, but that's what the track record has been for a very long period of time now. And one of the biggest problems with that is the TV markets, the big markets are always going to get more viewership and more money is going to come in, even when those topics may not be relevant. So if you want to talk about a small market team like an Oklahoma City or a Memphis or a whoever, it's just not going to have as many eyeballs on it as if you were talking about the 17-win Lakers, because the market is just so astronomically bigger. There's a much bigger fan base, much bigger viewership, and that's kind of the unfortunate side of the TV aspect, is that those companies want to make their money, and that's what they're going to prioritize. That's definitely something ESPN has gotten really, I guess, their bread and butter used to be like what we grew up with, the Sports Center, the highlights, boom, 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 we hit these things, not the debate driven aspect, which is essentially all that ESPN is. But all of the major companies have debate driven shows, podcasts, etc. That's just what the human attention span wants to hear at this point, is the debate driven topics. So that's a different conversation for sure. Speaking of different conversations, though, let's talk NFL offseason. NFL free agency officially underway, a couple days through. There's been several blockbuster moves. There's been some surprising moves. There's also been some controversy as well, as Maxx Crosby was traded to the Baltimore Ravens from the Las Vegas Raiders for 2 first-round picks, 2026 and 2027. And then all of a sudden, yesterday, the Ravens back out of the Maxx Crosby trade. He failed his physical. Now, he's 2 months past that surgery. His surgeon said that he's actually, if anything, ahead of schedule, and there should be no issues. So, interesting decision. And after that, you wake up. I was up this morning when this happened, about 8 a.m., but the Ravens sign division rival Trey Hendrickson from the Cincinnati Bengals. They sign him for 4 years, $112 million. And by backing out of the Maxx Crosby trade, they now keep their 2 first-round picks. So I definitely think it's suspect. I definitely think there was some tampering behind the scenes that took place. Definitely gives Mark Williams, LA Lakers vibes for sure. But this is also not the first time that the Ravens have actually done this. In 2018, they went and signed Ryan Grant. All that was set to take place. All of a sudden, Michael Crabtree became a free agent. So the Ravens then failed Ryan Grant's physical. They went and signed Michael Crabtree. And Ryan Grant eventually, the unfortunate side for him was that he was out of the league within the next year. So maybe the physical aspect for him held up. But I can't really say the same here for Maxx Crosby. So it just feels like there's some blatant tampering aspects that may be going on in the Ravens organization. And this is the same organization that got in trouble for the flawed injury reports over the last few seasons. So definitely something to take note of.
Well, yeah, I think this is the problem with this tampering period, right? Like all of these moves get announced in the past couple of days, but none of them are official. Like even all these teams, are signing these big free agents, but pen has not been put to paper yet. So like technically, like all of these moves could be, reversed or done away with before 4 o'clock today. At the time of this recording, we still got a little over an hour until then. So like Maxx Crosby, the news breaks about this big massive trade, and I thought it was great for the Ravens. I thought they really needed to capitalize on this window that they currently have with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. You're in a great window to do so with Jesse Minter coming in his first year. Kind of, feels like they're really going after the Seahawks model where you get that young defensive head coach. You trust your veterans on offense. You just build a good team and you kind of go from there. Maxx Crosby is a phenomenal player, simply put. He's great in the run game. He's great at getting after the passer. He's still in his prime, 28 years old. He is phenomenal. I mean, he's great. So I thought this was a great move for the Raiders. And then the news breaks that they back out of it, and it was because of the physical. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm not buying it, because there is no way that you make this move without knowing that Maxx Crosby underwent that knee surgery at the end of the season. And I've never heard of a meniscus tear being something to get in the way of a big business move like this. So I'm not really buying that. I think the Ravens looked at it and I think they just got cold feet. I think they had second thoughts. I think they made this move. In theory, it makes sense, right? You have to give up a little, give up some assets to go and get a premier edge rusher like this who makes your defense infinitely better in both aspects, like I said, against the pass and the run. Well, then when a guy like Trey Hendrickson hits the market and you're like, well, all we have to do is give up some money. We can keep our draft capital, because the Ravens are losing some guys all around their offense. I think they realized the importance of having those first rounders, right? You're losing Isaiah Likely. You just lost Tyler Linderbaum. Like, it's the nature of the NFL. It's the business. You're going to lose free agents. So I think they realize that they need that capital. And the conversation becomes, how much of a drop-off is it from Maxx Crosby to Trey Hendrickson? I do think there's a bit of a drop-off, but if you bring in a defensive-minded head coach and you put pieces around him, like Trey Hendrickson is going to go back to being his dominant pass-rushing self. He's going to be better in a better defense. So I'm kind of in a weird spot with this, because, yes, it's a little immoral, a little unethical from the Ravens side of it. I don't really like that they did it. It's bad business, but at the end of the day, I do think it is a win for the Ravens. I do think it makes more sense to keep that draft capital and to still get one of the game's best edge rushers.
And the reality for the Ravens is that this is just my personal opinion, but I don't personally believe them acquiring this high-profile edge rusher, whether it's Trey Hendrickson or it's Maxx Crosby, is going to change their fortunes when the NFL season comes around. They've lost almost 3,500 snaps from their team from last season, and that's a lot of snaps you got to replace. Some of those guys in the secondary, obviously Linderbaum is a huge loss. So I think the Ravens have other priorities. They definitely need to uh, focus on improving. And one way to do that is retaining these draft picks that you probably had second thoughts about giving up in the first place. So I think obviously for them, like I think any organization that had the chance to do this would. But there's definitely organizations that, for the sake of transparency and ethics and all the other stuff, probably don't back out like the Ravens did. So that's a different conversation for sure. One thing on the Ravens too, there's been a lot of media discourse about, no more excuses for Lamar. Or this is finally your chance. Like there should be no excuses. And Lamar clapped back at some people talking about there has never been an excuse. But the reality is, there really honestly should have never been an excuse for Lamar Jackson, because in his 8 playoff games, the Ravens are giving up under 19 points per game. For context, Patrick Mahomes in his several playoff games, the Chiefs have given up just under 24 points per game. Josh Allen and the Bills, they're hovering around 26 points per game. And then we don't even have to talk about Aaron Rodgers and Dak Prescott because they're at like 25 points per game and 27 points per game. So I think that is indicative of the fact that Lamar has had his chances. The Ravens have had their chances. Their defense has been very reliable in the postseason, holding teams under their scoring average. I think 7 of the 8 playoff games Lamar has played. But the caveat to that is the Ravens defense has only generated 2 turnovers in the playoffs across those 8 games Lamar has played. So I think while they haven't been able to generate the big plays and the turnovers, they have limited teams to a worse offensive performance than what they had on average. And the Ravens offense has, frankly, let them down time and time again. So I think while this move is big, whether it's Hendrickson or Crosby or whatever it is, while it's big, I don't think it's going to be the complete game changer that the Ravens are looking for it to be. It's definitely going to be impactful, but I don't think it's going to be the type of move that vaults them up to some prestigious elite level of contendership that they have not actually had in the last few years. So I think it's definitely an upgrade. It's not a lateral move, but I think in terms of their season outlook, it's going to be a lateral move in terms of how I think they're going to perform.
Well, yeah, they're really banking on Lamar Jackson because I told you this before. I thought Lamar Jackson was hurt last year. I think that's why he didn't really run a ton. I think that's why his play dipped a little bit. I think he was hurt going into the season. I think he had that foot injury, and then when he suffers, I believe it was a hamstring earlier on in the year. That's just tough. And then eventually they kind of figure it out late in the game, late in the season, and then they have that wild Week 18 game against the Steelers where, honestly, just a typical Ravens game where they've got so many opportunities to either put the game away or they can go and win the game, and then they don't. And the Ravens did choke a lot of games this year. So I do think the Ravens will be slightly better next year, but I mean, they're going to have to do some work here. Obviously losing Tyler Linderbaum, not good. They've got some other free agents on the offensive line. But if you're not the biggest fan of this Trey Hendrickson move, you must not have been a big fan of the Maxx Crosby trade in the first place then, right?
Um, I thought it was like for the Raiders. I've been preaching this. I've been preaching this for the Browns too since we're on this. But like the Raiders have so many holes on their team, which first off, credit to them. They have spent a lot of money in free agency. They have definitely addressed a lot of these needs, specifically on the defensive side of the ball, primarily. But what I would say for sure is that like when you're in that rebuilding state, I think just personally it makes a lot of sense to at least inquire about trading your top player, your superstar player, the guy that is at a positional need for every team in the league, because that's the type of position that can win you a Super Bowl or get you to the Super Bowl. So I thought the Raiders should have been in the camp of trading Maxx Crosby. I don't think that should change. I agree with it 100%. I've said the same thing time and time again for Myles Garrett and the Browns, just because I feel like there's enough holes imminent around the team that warrants trading Garrett, spreading that money or those pieces in other places, and then obviously you're not replacing Myles Garrett, you're not replacing Maxx Crosby, but you can definitely replace it via multiple players, right? Like look at the Cowboys, for example. They get rid of Micah Parsons. All of a sudden they have Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, and Quinnen Williams on their defensive line, and they still have the financial flexibility after restructuring some deals from Dak and CeeDee to then go and pay George Pickens more than likely after this one season on the franchise tag. So I think the Cowboys have been very indicative of what it can look like if you move your star player and you allocate those resources elsewhere or in the same place, just with different guys. And I think they're definitely creating a blueprint of what that can look like. Is it going to be successful? We'll find out. The Cowboys secondary is buns. It's not good. So that's the area that they need to address in the draft. But they've definitely done a great job at committing to the stopping the run game part that Jerry Jones has talked about for a few seasons. So I just think for the Raiders, they were the winner out of that trade. Obviously, Crosby's entering his prime. He's at that age where you're going to get that elite play, but he's already shown that elite play. He's coming off an injury that whenever there's a big injury, you kind of raise questions because you never know. There's some uncertainty, but obviously the Ravens are trying to make a splash move. I don't blame them for it. I was just shocked when I saw it was 2 first-round picks. I think that's definitely telling for sure. And I think they probably regretted that in the coming days and ultimately found a way to fail his physical. So the Ravens might have got out of this one sneakily, but I don't think it was right, nor do I think they should get out of it. I think the NFL should punish them in some way, shape, or form. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, I'm sure the NFL will come down, and I would imagine that they would, give out some form of punishment. But I want to go back to your point about now that you think the Raiders should still trade Maxx Crosby. I think after looking at their moves, I think they should hang on to him. Like I just he's been so valuable to this defense, and we see how valuable edge rushers can be to a defense as a whole. But he's more than that. He's great in the run game. And when you look at who they added, especially to their front seven, Nakobe Dean, Quay Walker, Malcolm Kuntz, Kwity Paye. I mean, they spent a lot of money here. Eric Stokes in the secondary. I mean, they spent a lot of money. I'm assuming with hopes that they want to build a foundation. They went out, spent some money on defense. I think they're kind of taking the Patriots approach. You have some young pieces on the team, and you go out, you spend on the defense, and then you build the rest through the draft. They're going to have a young quarterback in Fernando Mendoza. I don't know if it's going to work or not. I mean, obviously all of these contracts will have to pay out, and all these guys will have to stay healthy, and they'll have to contribute. But when you go out and you spend the kind of cash you do to reset the market for a guy like Tyler Linderbaum and then go and add a bunch of proven playmakers like this on your defense, I don't think it makes sense really to move on from Maxx Crosby now because you have all these pieces. You're clearly saying that you feel like you can win some games. I would hang on to Maxx Crosby. I think this might be a blessing in disguise for the Raiders, to be honest. Trading Maxx Crosby before all these deals made sense. You hate to trade away a player of that caliber. You really do, although the haul might be worth it. But a guy like Maxx Crosby, who's just so dedicated to the Raiders organization, he has such a great relationship with the front office. I mean, he was at Antonio Pierce's introductory press conference, Pete Carroll's introductory press conference. He was there for Clint Kubiak. I mean, this is a guy who really does bleed the silver and black, and he really is a Raider. I mean, he even said he wants to be a Raider for life. So I do think this can be a blessing in disguise, and I do think that the Raiders should hang on to Maxx Crosby. I just think it makes sense. I mean, this could easily be one of the best front sevens in football next year if all of these guys live up to their hype. I mean, they're going to be able to stop the run. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. Again, not saying the Raiders are going to set the world on fire, but they've got some nice pieces on this defense, and I definitely think that they should hang on to Maxx Crosby now.
I have one counter argument, and it's simply something I saw recently. I think on Twitter, like they were talking about this as well. But all these moves, like teams have made, right? There was a lot of teams that were suitors for Maxx Crosby, and a lot of them pivoted away from him, or looking at the Raiders and the Ravens, for example, they made their moves under the assumption that the trade would go through, right? So let's say they don't even consider trading Maxx Crosby. Do they still sign some of the players that they've brought in, right? So that's the only caveat is, does that like put a wrench in your plans for both the Raiders and the Ravens and whoever else across the league that, Maxx Crosby was going to be in a certain place and he's now not in that place. So that's the one caveat. The Raiders still have some work to do. There was some reports coming out that they didn't prefer for Fernando Mendoza to start right away. And I actually am a proponent of that. I think that makes sense. As you know, as we've talked many times, I'm a little less in terms of like how high someone is on Fernando Mendoza. I'm a little bit more on the lesser side. I don't believe and him being a number one pick, for example, right? Like, I think you can find some very valuable day two, maybe day three quarterbacks in this class specifically that aren't a massive drop off from a guy like Fernando Mendoza, who definitely, I don't want to say coasted through at Indiana, but I think the offense was definitely structured in a way to schematically be successful for him. He had a lot of limitations that they were able to scheme up and disguise personally. So I'm just, in the proponent of get a veteran quarterback, have him be the quarterback for the year, half the year, however long it is, and go from there. They already got rid of Geno, so they are in the market for some sort of veteran quarterback. So I'm curious who they might bring in. A lot of these guys have already signed in other places, but there's still a few notable names that they could maybe go after. So I don't want to say like Joe Flacco is a notable name, but in terms of the veteran quarterback we're talking about, a guy like a Joe Flacco might make sense. Obviously, Tua went to the Falcons. That's another conversation. Kyler Murray is still a free agent, although I think he's bound for Minnesota. So there's been a lot of moves at quarterback, and I think the Raiders definitely still need to make one there before they draft Fernando Mendoza.
Yeah, but the only thing is, so normally I would be a proponent of quarterbacks sitting. I want to say we've had this conversation before. It just there is a proven track record to it, but now with the transfer portal and with the way that some of these college teams are built, I mean, Fernando Mendoza has played a lot of college football. I mean, he played a full 4 years. I mean, he has seen a lot of football. I just don't know how much would a year sitting, how much would that help him? And like again, you said the Raiders currently don't have a formidable starter on their roster. Now, if they had a guy like say the Rams were going to go take Mendoza, okay, fine, I would understand. You could sit behind a guy like Stafford, or say the Chiefs were to take him. You could sit behind Mahomes. You could sit behind a guy who is a bona fide starter, knows what the hell he's doing, all that stuff. I think this is a different case here. I think when you get a guy like Mendoza who has played as much football as he has and has made as many starts as he has, I think you just got to get going from the jump. You saw what the Broncos did with Bo Nix. You put pieces around him, you give him the coaching, and they hit the ground running from day one. Even you saw it with Jackson Dart. You just kind of just have to throw them into the fire at that point, but you got to put the help around them. You got to give them the coaching. I think the Broncos are doing it the right way. They put the help around Bo Nix. They've done kind of, I don't want to say dumbed down the offense for him, but it's good play calling by Sean Payton. They've given him a good run game, whereas the Giants, not necessarily doing that with Jackson Dart, at least not in year one. Already going through a coaching change, but now you see in the offseason, right? They're giving him some weapons. They went out and they get Isaiah Likely. They go out and they upgrade the coaching staff. He's going to get Malik Neighbors back. So I'm kind of in the camp that it really is a case by case scenario. Now, when you get a guy like Ty Simpson, who's only started 1 year, he's only made 15 starts in college. Yeah, that's a guy that probably needs to sit, needs to learn, just because he doesn't have the experience. But when you get a guy like Fernando Mendoza, who's made almost, I think Bo Nix played like 60 something games in college. Yeah, it's just a similar situation with Fernando Mendoza. I just don't know how much you're going to learn sitting behind some free agent bridge quarterback that comes in, and because he's probably not going to start the whole year. So like that just doesn't make sense to me. He's probably going to end up playing at some point later on in the year. You might as well just speed it up and just start him from day one. I don't even want to say throwing him into the fire, because I do think that playing games, real live NFL games, is very valuable. And you saw this with the Browns this past year, right? They start Joe Flacco. It just felt like a complete waste of time because he wasn't going to start the entire year. You had other rookie quarterbacks that you wanted to get to, whether it be Dylan Gabriel, Shador Sanders. You wanted to see what both of those guys could do so that you could evaluate them. They can get that NFL experience and they can get their feet wet, and you develop with real NFL experience. And it's almost just a waste to start one of these older veteran quarterbacks if you know that they're not going to start for the entire year, because whether you're not going to be competitive or you just don't think they're going to start the whole year, then you're just kind of wasting your time. So I would caution teams against doing that. The in terms of the Raiders trading out of the first pick, I think it's a different conversation. I've kind of disagreed with you on that in the past. I just think that you just got to take the quarterback, especially in a quarterback weak class like this. Now, again, if they had a formidable starter, I think they could afford to maybe take one of those later round project quarterbacks, because there are a fair amount of those guys in here, with experience that have some good NFL traits, like Drew Aller, like a Carson Beck, some of those other names we talk about, even like a Talon Green, guys that they just need to sit first. I don't feel like Fernando Mendoza is one of those guys. However, I will say I do question a little bit, Fernando Mendoza's ability. I do think you have a right to be cautious, because I don't think he was asked to do a ton at Indiana, but I think this is kind of the future of the college quarterback. How often are guys going to go like Ty Simpson? I think is a special case. How many times is a guy going to go to a college, go and sit for 3 years, and learn the system, learn the ins and outs of it, learn the intricacies of learning a drop back offense? Fernando Mendoza threw a ton of RPOs, and granted, he made a lot of great throws. I mean, he threw more touchdowns and incompletions against Alabama in the playoffs, and he made plays when he had to. Look, certainly deserving of the number one pick, but really wasn't asked to do a whole ton at Indiana. But that's just kind of the future of the college quarterback, right? You get these guys on basically 1 year deals to come in and win now. These older coaches, Kurt Cignetti, 66 years old, he ain't got time to be sitting and developing a quarterback. He ain't doing that. With the land of NIL, he's going to go and get his guy in the portal. You see with Josh Hoover. You go and play at while at BP4, a bit of a smaller school. Now you take a step up and you go play for a national title contender, and we'll see how that works. But yeah, I think this is going to be the future of the college quarterback. These guys are not asked to do a ton in college anymore, but a guy like Fernando Mendoza, I do think, should probably start from day one.
So, adding to this number one pick discourse that we're discussing, I was on my phone trying to find this because I didn't have it saved, but Mike Tannenbaum from ESPN tweeted this out it was on the 9th of March, actually, 10:04 a.m., so a couple days ago, but remarkable stat from ESPN Stats Info about quarterback drafting and development. So Kyler Murray will now be the 7th straight quarterback drafted first overall by his team that didn't make it until the age of 30. Matt Stafford was the last one to do it. Who didn't make until the age. So didn't play on that team or wasn't there until that age of 30, which Matt Stafford was the last one to do it. So all these number one picks at quarterback, they get let go very soon in the process. There's not a lot of patience or trust with them. They oftentimes don't even make it through their entire rookie contract or that 5th-year option. So, and if they do, that 5th-year option is kind of the cut line. Interesting stat there. Definitely something to take in mind when the Raiders more than likely, almost definitively take Fernando Mendoza number one. And when Fernando Mendoza gets to Las Vegas, I want him to do me a favor. This is totally unrelated, but I want him to do me a favor. That Heisman trophy that he has, right, somewhere, I want him to hand that thing to Ashton Genty, his soon-to-be teammate, because that should be his Heisman from the year prior. And ironically, if Ashton Genty did that a year later, this year, he probably wins the Heisman. So I'm just saying, I think Fernando Mendoza should be nice. He should, share that Heisman with Ashton Genty so he gets a feeling of what it is like to hold that Heisman trophy, because he still got robbed to this day. I stand on that. I think the universe probably stands on it as well, but whole other conversation there. I definitely think the Raiders are. A report came out. The plan is Maxx Crosby will be a Raider this upcoming season, so doubt he gets traded. There are a ton of suitors, though. The Eagles were interested. The Bears were interested. The Bills, the Chiefs. There's lots of teams that want Maxx Crosby. So at the end of the day, is there going to be an offer too enticing for the Raiders to pass up on or not pass up on, and eventually that could lead to Maxx Crosby leaving? But he's been very adamant about being a Raider for life, and if this trade went through, he would have liked to finish his career in a Raiders uniform, so coming back at some point. So, we'll see. But as of now, Maxx Crosby will be a Raider, and with that, we're not at an hour yet. We got like 18 minutes here. We're chill. We're fine. So, I want to talk about the rest of free agency. Like, what moves have stuck out to you? Who are some winners? Who are some losers? What are some guys that are still available that you think make sense for teams to potentially acquire? So what are your overall thoughts on, I guess, all of that? So I guess pick one thing maybe, but what's an all-encompassing point to free agency so far?
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the Raiders. I really like what the Raiders have done. I mean, they spent a ton of money, but the Titans, I think, are in a decent boat. I really like the Wan'Dale Robinson signing. I think that's a huge get for Cam Ward. You already have a guy like Chimere DK who had a good rookie year last year. He's about 6'1". He can play on the outside. And then you bring in a little bit of a smaller guy like Wan'Dale Robinson. And yeah, you got to pay him a little bit of money, but I mean, this is a good weapon for Cam Ward here. And this was the thing. Cam Ward had very, very minimal help last year, and it's really a damn shame because he has such arm talent. And I think the Titans are doing a good job of kind of capitalizing on, his rookie contract. At least that's the goal, right? So I think getting Wan'Dale Robinson is a good pickup there. for the Titans. I just think it's going to be a seamless fit. I mean, you saw Wan'Dale Robinson had a couple of really nice games. I believe when Jameis was starting, even Jackson Dart. I mean, he's shown a lot of flashes. While he might be limited, and he's probably not a wide receiver one, but I think he's certainly going to be a nice piece here for the Titans. And I just like what the Titans have done. I mean, the Raiders and the Titans had the most cap space going into free agency. They're both going to have young quarterbacks, and I thought they have both really utilized their money well to, for what it's worth. I will say though, I think one move that I was not really a fan of, the 49ers going out and getting Mike Evans. Look, I like Mike Evans, the player, but he's 32 years old. He's aging. He's declining. He just had his first year without 1,000 yards, and I know it was because of the injuries, but I mean, those injuries are only going to linger on around. And I know Juwan Jennings is a free agent, but I would have made it a point of emphasis to bring back Juwan Jennings as opposed to Mike Evans. While I do think Mike Evans can be good, but we know what the injury history is with the 49ers, with that plant next to their practice field. I mean, I don't think that's a good sign. And they did have to give up a good amount of money to go and get Mike Evans. One, I'm surprised he left Tampa to begin with. I thought he was going to be a Buccaneer for life. It just made so much sense to stay there. Your career, play with Baker in the sunny weather. He's made a home there. But I really have a hard time coming out and saying that teams are losers in free agency, or this move is for sure not going to work, because who knows? Maybe Mike Evans, can be revitalized in a Kyle Shanahan offense, and Brock Purdy can feed him. And I do think the fit makes sense because, like I said, I think this is kind of the replacement for Juwan Jennings. They still have their slot guy in Ricky Pearsall, but I just think that this is a step down from Juwan Jennings, in my opinion. I like Juwan Jennings a lot. He's younger. He's a good route runner. Mike Evans is good, but I just think a small overpay for an aging, declining receiver. I would have opted to just keep around the younger guy in Juwan Jennings.
Bold take on the Juwan Jennings aspect. I'm less of a fan of Juwan Jennings. However, he has proven in the last few seasons what his value can be. So I'm less on the questioning or concerning side with Juwan Jennings. I have a little bit more faith in him as we've seen what he can do, for sure. Another thing for the Niners too, they still have to figure out this whole Brandon Ayuk situation. Are they going to be forced to release him? Are they going to be able to trade him? There's a lot of that going on. I do think that this is like a different type of winner, but with a lot of the free agent signings that have taken place at the receiver position, a lot of the suitors for AJ Brown are now no longer suitors, I would think. So I personally think that's a win for the Eagles. They don't have to eat a ton of dead money. They can spend that money elsewhere. They made a nice move, got Tariq Woolen, hopefully to solidify the corner 2 spot there in Philadelphia. But outside of that, the Eagles have lost a lot of guys. Seattle has lost a lot of players as well. The Ravens have lost a lot of players. So there's definitely some teams who have a lot of departures, and they haven't necessarily done all the work to recuperate like those players back in some way, shape, or form. But we'll see. So I guess the takeaways for me, it's the money. It's the actual money being spent. I mean, we started off, one of the first deals was Alec Pierce for $29 million per season to come back to the Colts. And that makes me, as an Eagles fan, knowing A.J. Brown is due for a payday in like 2 seasons, I'm a little bit more on the side of maybe after the year trading A.J. Brown, because he's going to want $50 million. And I just think that's unattainable. When the Eagles have to pay Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean over $20 million here in the next few years, and Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, and the list goes on and on, I think it's definitely going to be eye-opening for some teams for sure. I do think there was some questionable moves, right? I don't know what your thoughts are on Tua to Atlanta. I'm a little bit less of a fan of it personally. We talk about the whole backup quarterback or veteran quarterback aspect. I think Michael Penix has not played bad enough to warrant benching him. He just has some injury concerns. And with that being said, I don't think bringing in a very similar player with an even worse history record or track record of history or injury, you know what I'm trying to say, a tongue twister. But I don't think it makes sense to then invest money into a guy like Tua when they could literally do the exact same deal and maybe go get a guy like Kyler or a guy, or I don't know, keep Kirk Cousins in the first place. That's an idea too. Danny Dimes was able to find a way to get $50 million for the next 2 years per season with the Colts now, it's technically 44, but up to 100 with incentives. I'm a little bit skeptical on how he's going to look post Achilles and post all the injuries he had, frankly, because he had several on his leg. But I'm curious how that looks for them. Obviously, somebody that knows the scheme. I think the Dolphins going and getting Malik Willis was a nice, maybe short-term solution at quarterback. I think he's got some potential. We've seen what he can do with the Packers in his time in Green Bay. He went 70 of 89 passing with a ton of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. So obviously that efficiency is skewed. It's a lot of it in small sample sizes, but I do think Malik Willis is deserving of a second chance in the NFL. Similarly, a guy like Will Levis probably is deserving of a second chance with another team because of his raw arm talent, which we've talked about with guys like Cam Ward. But I think overall, I agree it's hard to say that there's definitive losers, but I do think the Ravens probably come in as like my number one loser. I'm not going to say Seattle because a lot of their departures were expected, so you have to recoup that through the draft. But the Ravens are a team that have frankly fallen flat in free agency. I also think the Detroit Lions have fallen flat in free agency. Isaiah Pacheco is a cool player and all. I don't think I would want him as a backup to Jahmyr Gibbs. I think I'd rather just invest in a fourth-round draft pick for a running back rather than sign Pacheco to probably what's going to be more money and not as many snaps as probably what David Montgomery got. So there's been some nice moves for sure. The Texans have made some nice signings. There's been some moves as well across the NFC. Like the Giants have been very active. They've tried to fill some needs as well. The Commanders have tried to be active. I really like what the Cowboys have done. Can't believe I'm saying that, but although it's not really free agency based, it is off-season based. Making another trade, getting Rashawn Gary, being aggressive. This is the Jerry that we have wanted to see or have talked about for quite some time with this aggression. But I feel like their front office is finally getting it. They're finally understanding like how to maximize and sometimes manipulate value for the better. So I think a year from now, or if I could look back from a year to now, if you tell me the Cowboys have Micah Parsons and all the players that they had initially, and they win however many games, okay, fair. But if you then turn around and tell me, okay, the Cowboys have Quinn Williams, Kenny Clark, and Rashawn Gary, and they have $44 million of restructures in terms of cap flexibility, I think I would probably take option 2, just because I think it makes a little bit more sense to allocate that money elsewhere. So I really like what the Cowboys have done. They're one of the teams that have been aggressive. Another team we didn't talk about, the Carolina Panthers, have been spending money, and I think that is going to be huge in what is a typically lukewarm division. I think the NFC South is very winnable for all 4 of those teams. The Saints are going to be better. They've spent some money. They've made some moves. I like Travis Etienne going there to play with Kellen Moore in that offense. I really like what the Panthers have done. They're addressing defense. They're addressing edge rusher. They're being proactive. I think they're definitely a team to watch as well in the NFC. And then looking at the AFC side of it, the Browns have definitely addressed offensive line. I think that was definitely the big question for a lot of you Browns fans, was that O-line. They have signed 2 guards. They've traded for Titus Howard. I like what the Browns have done. Now, do all those players fit together on the same O-line? We'll find out. But it's the effort, it's the intentionality of trying to improve and a clear need on the team. I think that's really important. And I think that could really do or die the Browns season is how that looks overall, to be honest with you. So I like what they've done. The Steelers are trying. They're trying. I'm not going to say they're a winner or a loser, but they're trying. They're making some moves. They're signing some guys. The teams that are a little bit more proactive in free agency, I feel like the following season they're either really bad or they definitely fall short of expectations, or they actually typically exceed them. They're not typically there's no like real like middle ground, I guess, with free agency and like a lot of the spending that happens. It's like the Panthers are either going to be really happy with how next season goes or really upset. There isn't going to be some middle ground about like how they looked. The Jets have spent a lot of money as well on their defense. They traded for Minkah Fitzpatrick for one of the cheapest trades I've ever seen in my life. Minkah for essentially a 6th or 7th round pick. steal for the Jets, in my opinion. I know they have to pay him, but they have the money to pay him. So the teams that have been a little bit more proactive in spending, in particular the bad ones, I think a lot of them have so far been winners in this free agency offseason part of that the free agency period of the offseason. I know what I'm trying to say. So I think that's kind of my big takeaway. There's a lot of contenders that haven't made a lot of moves, and a lot of that is financially driven. So we'll see. But free agency's definitely been very active. There's been a lot of moves that have, been eye catching for sure. It helps that we have this Maxx Crosby thing to talk about, but I just think overall this entire week it's just been very fulfilling as a sports fan. And we didn't even talk about the fact that in the WBC, Team USA got smacked by Italy. They're on the verge of getting eliminated already, and what should be, I think, a clear, definitive winner of this tournament. I know baseball is a little bit different because a lot of the players are actually not from the United States, but the United States have the two best pitchers in the world on the same team, and they're probably going to lose. And Aaron Judge continues to disappear in big moments, such as the WBC. And being a Tigers fan, I have a little bit of questions. I definitely have some, not concerns, but I'm definitely questioning why Tarek Skubal decided to play essentially one game or pitch one game and then leave. That's Scott Boras influenced, I'm sure, but we didn't even talk about that aspect as well. So, I mean, sports in general, it's been a collection of talk. It's been a collection of topic. It's been a collection of controversy for sure. And we've got the NHL playoffs coming around here soon, shortly. So that might be something we talk about a little bit when that time comes. But outside of that, what are your final thoughts on either the NBA, the NFL, free agency? It can be anything.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting point that you brought about the NFL and the spending. There has kind of been a correlation between spending money and winning. I mean, take a look at the Patriots and the Bears this year. I mean, both spent a ton in free agency, and they both went to the playoffs. Obviously, the Patriots went to the Super Bowl. I mean, it has led to success, right? You got to spend to bring the players in, but then it's a huge testament to their coaching staff as well, right? Like both coaching staffs did a phenomenal job of putting those guys in position to succeed. I mean, the Bears needed offensive line to protect their young quarterback, and it worked out. They were able to run the football this year. They were, Caleb Williams had his best season so far, through his first 2 years. So it is interesting to see, where teams, and I know a lot of teams that kind of overpay, but bad teams have to overpay. The Raiders were not getting Tyler Linderbaum if they didn't, reset the market. The Browns probably weren't getting some of the O linemen that they got if they didn't overpay by a little bit. Bad teams have to do that. So I think that just kind of is the new thing with the NFL is that free agency is a big thing. Teams recognize they have to spend. I mean, Andrew Berry for the Browns came out and said they really like the Bears model. You have the young quarterback. They had Caleb Williams. The Browns view their young quarterback as Shedeur Sanders. I mean, obviously they are not comparable whatsoever. You invested in them differently. Obviously, much different talent level, skill set, all that. But the Browns want to build around a young quarterback, whether that be this year or next year's draft. So that they went out, they spent on the offensive line. They already have the defense there. So I think a lot of teams, kind of look at not necessarily just the Bears model, but that model in general of you have to be able to spend the money. You can't cheap your way through free agency. And yeah, I understand some teams are different when you already have big contracts and you have to pay some guys, but that's also the caveat to the business, right? Look at the Seahawks. Kenneth Walker wins you Super Bowl MVP, but he happens to be at a very replaceable position. You don't really feel comfortable spending money at that position, so you let him go. You let a guy like Tariq Woolen go. I mean, you have to cut some losses somewhere, and it just kind of is what it is. Then they end up paying Rashid Shaheed. I should have mentioned this. I'm not a huge fan of that signing either. I understand Rashid Shaheed, good player, great returner, very explosive. Probably is one of the big reasons why the Seahawks won the Super Bowl. He essentially won that game for the Seahawks. I believe it was Week 14 against the Rams. He opened up the game against the Niners with the kick return. He changed the outcome of some games. But you're also paying him some wide receiver one money, and I don't know how I feel about that. I can't necessarily defend giving a guy who's your wide receiver three, wide receiver one type of money. I think it was a bit of an overpay, but if they feel like he's that valuable in the return game and he can really be inducive to winning, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, I kind of agree on the Shaheed point. Um, Definitely maybe a little bit of an overpay. I think it's about 17 million AAV, so I don't think he's necessarily worth that for what he does. I think he's pretty replaceable. However, he's the big marketable name and in that realm, and I think the Seahawks kind of just felt like they were losing everybody else. Let's bring this guy back. So maybe a little bit of a peer pressure move on the part of themselves. Um, One thing we did not talk about, I almost forgot about this, but how do you think Jason Tatum has looked in his return back? I tried to tell you, I think he's gonna, as long as he's back hovering around like 20 points a game, Celtics get into the playoffs. I think they very well, if he's even at like 85, 90%, they come out of the East. I think it's really hard with how well they've played without him to think they don't come out of the East with him, I guess, is like my take on it. When they've had the remarkable performances from Nemias Queta and they acquire Vucevic, they've got Sam Hauser knocking down threes. Baylor Shireman's looked very good as well. Ron Harper just had 22 last night. That's Ron Harper Jr., I should say. So Peyton Pritchard as well. Derek White, Jaylen Brown, we understand what they have, but adding Tatum to a lot of those already movable parts or interchangeable parts, I think really makes the Celtics dangerous and potentially the favorite to come out of the East because we both are not that high on the Pistons making a deep postseason run because of some of the inefficiencies and flaws within their team. But what are your thoughts on Tatum? I feel like he's exceeded maybe your expectations. I think he's around kind of what I expected him to look like.
Yeah, and as a Cavs fan, I mean, it's on record. I've been saying the only team that scares me coming out of the East is the Celtics, and Jason Tatum kind of only confirmed that for me. Now, I got to be honest, I'm surprised. I did not think he'd be playing this much. I thought they would ease him in a little bit. I will say though, he clearly does not look 100%. I think he still looks a little rusty, which was to be expected, but he just doesn't look like he has that same burst, that same hop. And maybe that comes back, he's still very young and he's still very talented. Maybe that comes back, through just playing and getting back up to game speed and, kind of getting accustomed back to, playing at the level that he once was. But I do question if, teams kind of get adjusted to him being in the rotation come playoff time. Do they start attacking him on defense? I mean, do they, start going at him? Do they start trying to put, I don't want to say hunt him, but do they start, attacking him defensively? Because he might be a bit of a liability on defense if he cannot move that way, if he can't rebound quite as effectively as he has in the past, if he can't, necessarily just have that same bounce. But I really am surprised that he's playing as much as he is. I mean, he's still knocking down some jump shots. I think he's going to kind of turn into a bit more of a shooter. But what made Jason Tatum so good was his slashing ability and the fact that you could rely on him on defense and on the glass because he was kind of that all-around player. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets back into the game, as these weeks go along. But I got to say, to start off, I've been surprised. I've been impressed. I'm surprised he's playing as much as he is, and I've been impressed with how he's looked so far. While it is a little rusty, I think he looks good.
I definitely agree. And I think if he can, like I said, get to 85, 90%, and maybe he's already at 80 or 85, but if he can get as close to 100% as possible when the playoffs come around, watch out for the Celtics, especially if they get favorable matchups in the postseason. I think the Cavs and Celtics make sense coming out of the East. I still have my reservations about the Knicks. However, Mike Brown's really the only change that they had. They added some bench pieces, but we'll see on the Knicks. We'll see on the Sixers. We'll see on the Pistons. I think that's really the group in the East that's going to make a run for something. But outside of that, I personally don't have anything else. So I think that's going to conclude episode number 23 of Beyond the Box Score. I want to thank everybody once again for watching this, tuning in, listening, however you may be doing that, whatever various platforms you're doing it from. Like, subscribe, share, whatever it is you do on that platform. We appreciate it greatly. Like, subscribe, share as well with your friends and family, comment, do whatever it is you do. Honestly, we love the interaction. I like seeing it as well. I try to comment back on some of the TikTok interactions and comments we may get because that's our primary audience generator. So, just overall, I think it's been a remarkable week. We'll come back probably next week recapping what will be the majority of NFL free agency probably. And we'll also have Selection Sunday this upcoming Sunday. So we'll get to talk about that. will Miami, Ohio get the boot if they lose early in the MAC tournament? I don't agree with that, but we'll find out. Ohio State finally will be back in the NCAA tournament, it looks like, as well. So we'll have a lot of talking points for college basketball when that time comes. But just to kind of give that precursor and preview into what we may be discussing next week, that is what it would be. Outside of that, I want to thank everybody again for tuning in to episode 23 of Beyond the Box Score. Trayvon Hastings, Joey Korzanowski signing off. We'll catch you guys in the next one.